Welcome back, brothers and sisters. In today's video, I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know about running a stronghold, or a bastion as they call it, but I think stronghold's a cooler name. Running one of those in your new 2024 Dungeons & Dragons campaign. How do you give one to your characters? How do they build it? How do they use it in the campaign? What kinds of things can it offer to you? All that sort of stuff we're going to go over in this video. Now, a couple quick things before we start. One is, you guys know me. I'm all about homebrew, rule of cool, do things how you want to do them, how it makes sense for your table. And frankly, I think there are a lot of sections of rules in here that are clunky and don't align very well with the style of, I think, how a lot of us run our D&D campaigns, which is not a West Marches campaign where it's like, we're going to send, the party's here and we're going to send you off on a little adventure. Then you're going to come back and you're going to have some extended downtime. Then you're going to go do a totally different disconnected adventure. I think the majority of us run our campaigns in a much more narrative focused style where sort of everything is kind of building up to something big. It's all sort of connected and you're almost playing out in like scenes that just follow each other, one after another, as opposed to a lot of downtime, mass exploration sort of stuff. Now, not to say that there aren't lots of groups that do that and will greatly benefit from this rule that's been added to it, but I do think that a lot of us might read this section and think, I don't really know how this is gonna like fit into my campaign. So I'm hoping I can help you figure out how to actually do that in this video, just going off of how I would run it. The second thing is, I have a Kickstarter all about strongholds. It should have gone live today when I published this video. It is called The Doomed Stronghold. It is a paperback zine filled with all kinds of random tables to help you generate really cool strongholds for your players. So these two first lists here, it's a 1d12 list of desert strongholds. There's one for city strongholds. There's Arctic, astral, jungle strongholds, all those sorts of things. But there's also tables for things like 1d12 trade workers. Who are the hirelings that are going to run your stronghold and what makes them interesting? That table is super useful because there is not a table like that in this rule book. It doesn't have any sort of resource for how to generate an interesting, cool hireling. So you've got something like that, and you should go check that out. I've got it linked down in the description. If you're watching this far in the future and the Kickstarter's already over, this should be available on the church's store, so you can go snag that. But with that with all of that out of the way, let's jump into how to run a stronghold in Dungeons & Dragons 2024, and let us pray. First thing you're going to want to understand when it comes to a stronghold is, what is it? How does this new edition of the rules sort of define a stronghold or a bastion? And basically, they pitch it as a home or a base of operations for each of the characters. It's not something that the party gets collectively, although I do think that that could be a really simpler way to go about it. Just have your whole party inherit a stronghold, and then they sort of decide together what sorts of things they add to it, and they can all reconvene there. But it is pitched in this rule as each character will have their own stronghold, and it also says very explicitly, like, the players should have basically a majority of the say over what does the stronghold look like, what does the stronghold get as it levels up, what does it come equipped with. All that sort of stuff is meant to be left in the players' hands to give it their aesthetic spin and have it really fit the vibe of their character that they're going for, and work it into their narrative that they're trying to tell with the character, which I think is great. I really like that advice. I do think that there's nothing wrong with a dungeon master just sort of saying like, hey, here you go, like, I'm dropping a stronghold on you all, and you guys get to then do whatever you want with it. Because I do think that if we are being honest with ourselves, like, how much homework do our players really do? If you're lucky, like, they'll put most of their effort into writing up some crazy backstory. But if you told your players, like, go read the rules in the DMG about the stronghold that you guys are going to get, like, how many of them even own the DMG, right? So I do think there is a bit in a give and take there. Most of it can just be solved with you sending your players a message saying, hey, you guys are getting a stronghold here pretty soon. What sorts of things do you want there to be going on here in it? What do you want it to look like? Is there anything special or specific you're kind of hoping to have with it? What sort of purpose do you want it to serve for you all? And then you can kind of run with that as the dungeon master. I think most players would honestly be fine with that, but that's just my 2 cents with it. So that's what a stronghold is in the new rule set. Now let's talk about when characters get their stronghold. Per rules as written, characters get them at level 5. It just, when they reach that level, boom, they get it. And it says to kind of assume or work with your players to have something being, it's all going on in the background. As this campaign has been building up to level 5, it's assumed that it's being constructed, or the characters are making deals to kind of acquire one, or things like that. I think that's a fine way to go about it. But I would say that if you want it to really feel like something that is being built up to, instead of just like kind of just dropping it in their lap and not having a lot of narrative weight to it, then you do want to take effort as the campaign is progressing to plant those seeds early. Maybe at level 2 or level 3 is when the characters are first approached by their patron about saying, hey, I kind of am hoping to get you guys a stronghold to work out of. Anything I should be looking for? Or here are a few options of what I've kind of found. There's that old abandoned wizard's tower. There's the estate in the city that the city's putting up for auction. Maybe we could look into getting that. Or there's that castle. I've heard the Baron who runs it is kind of corrupt. Maybe we could dethrone them and then we can use that, right? All of those are sort of ways for you to bring the actual acquisition of the stronghold into the campaign. Because at least for me, I'm not a huge fan of just sort of hand waving things of just like, it's just been kind of happening. Like, not to say that you have to go to agonizing detail to like work out the logistical specifics of how the party gets their stronghold, but I do think it can be fun to have some of these little role play encounters where you just get to have conversations and think ahead and start anticipating receiving the stronghold. Because if it just, boop, here you go, level 5, here's your stronghold, it almost for some players might feel like a chore or a thing that they just don't care to invest in very much. It's just like, I've been having more fun just thinking about the abilities and stuff that I'm going to get, and I want to think about that. I don't really. Some of the other characters can run their stronghold. It's not something I really care about. So that's my advice. Go ahead and run with the level 5 thing. Although, I guess I do want to add something else here, which is like level 5 feels a little just kind of like, okay, like I don't know why it's level 5. I don't know why it wasn't level 3 or why a party couldn't start with a stronghold. And that is something I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but as you're building out the stronghold and giving it certain chambers and things, a lot of them have level requirements. If you want to add an armory, you like have to be at least level 5 or higher, which is a little weird that there's no option, there's no easy way for a dungeon master to introduce a stronghold earlier. Like if you wanted to just start a campaign with a stronghold, with your part, like for your party to work out of, either you're starting them at level 5 or you're going to start them at level 1 and just have to build up, I guess, to the idea that they can add some of these special things, which actually, now that I'm saying that, could be cool. I do think that could be fun. You get your stronghold at level 1, but you know you're going to have to spend some time being an adventurer, amassing some wealth, making some connections, doing all those sorts of things before you're going to actually be able to put rooms in it. So I guess it can be done, but they don't say that in the rule set. So I wanted to say that here. But yeah, that is how you go about giving your party a stronghold in the new rules. The next rule that is talked about in the rule book is taking orders or having a turn for your stronghold. And it says every 7 days that pass in game or in world, your stronghold takes a turn. And if your players or if the characters are at their stronghold, they can issue specific orders to the special facilities that are in their stronghold. And if they're not there, then the stronghold kind of just does what's called a maintain order. And we're going to talk about orders later on in the video, so I won't get too specific about those. But it does say that like or that you should do turns every 7 days, but you can do them when it makes a little more narrative sense. So if you are running a campaign that I imagine most of us are doing, which is very like scene based, let's go to the next cool thing and then the next cool thing and the next cool thing. There's not a ton of like extended downtime, especially in the sessions. It might be kind of hard to keep track of time, to know exactly like, has it been 7 days? Or like, oh my God, the past 3 sessions have been like 2 days of in-game time because there's just been so much crazy stuff going on, right? That happens a lot. So the way that they pitch it of calendar out these 7 days and make sure you're taking your turns is a little, I don't want to say unrealistic, but, and maybe it's just me in the way that I run my campaigns, but I could just see that being easy to forget. So I might say that like, whenever it makes narrative sense or whenever your players have an opportunity to take a turn in the stronghold, do that. They note there in the rules of like, oh, when the players come back to town to take a long rest or recoup and get some supplies, then hey, take a turn with your stronghold before you leave. I think that's a much better way to do it than, oh, it looks like I've been tracking off our days. It's day 7. I know you guys are down in the dungeon, but hey, let's stop everything and take our stronghold turn. It's not really how I would want to go about doing it. So if I were going to introduce a stronghold into my campaign, I would want to make sure that I am anticipating and thinking ahead of, am I doing things as the dungeon master to get the party back to their stronghold so they can take these turns? I think the last thing you'd want to do is give your players this really cool opportunity to build their own stronghold, but then they're never given the chance to actually go home and enjoy it. They're always off doing the next crazy thing, which is how I have run a lot of campaigns in the past. It's the timer mechanic from Runehammer, right? Of just like, keep that pressure on, keep it tense, keep it exciting. Like, we're all, well, I can't say we're all, but a lot of us are adults who have to carve time out of our schedule to come play D&D, and we want it to be exciting. We want it to feel like really worth that time. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're thinking about, like, are they going to be back home so that they can go to their stronghold and do things? Am I running a sandboxy enough campaign where I can just kind of hand wave the amount of time it would take to travel between the dungeon, getting back home to the stronghold? Let's just skip all that part. Skip the overland travel and give them more time at the stronghold to do cool things there, right? That's something you could do. Or am I giving them a means of communicating with their stronghold via a messenger raven or the sending stones or just a spell scroll to send a sending spell, right? Am I giving them the tools that they would need to communicate with their stronghold, even if they're away from it? And if they have some sort of crystal ball that allows them to see into it and actually see the faces of the hirelings that they have, to be able to see the rooms of the stronghold, to witness what's going on there, that can probably be just as fun and just as rewarding and feel as invested in the stronghold, even if you are this nomadic traveling adventurer who's almost never home, but you're calling in every once in a while to touch base on things. I think that's also a fine way to do it, but you just gotta make sure you're at least aware of how you want to do it. Up next, it talks about mapping the stronghold, and it says, again, let your players have as much say over this as you want or you feel comfortable with, or that is, expected of your group. If you've got a bunch of players that it's just a beer and pretzels thing and they just show up and they're excited to play, if you throw down a bunch of grid paper and say, draw me your stronghold, I think a lot of them are going to say, like, I don't even know how to do that. Like, how, what does that mean? Is this homework? And so thinking about it in my games, if I wanted my players to imagine what their stronghold looks like, do I really care about them gridding out exactly where are the windows, where are the doors, where are the hallways, where are the staircases, the defensive walls, how tall are they, how much money did they have to pay to build those? Because it notes like every 5-foot space of a wall, it's like 250 gold. Like, are all of those things stuff that I would want my players to do? Honestly, no, because I wouldn't even want to do that. Like, I hate mapping dungeons. I use a generator to just get my map. So the idea of like, oh God, I got to think about exactly how this hallway is going to intersect with these stairs so that I can add this room over here and this room over here, and where are the windows going? And like, there are some players who are going to think that's awesome. I am not one of them. I am not an architectural model creator, right? I think this is a great rule or a great point in a campaign where theater of the mind like really shines. For example, like if I were going to give my players this stronghold from the zine of like an ark, a petrified giant boat out in the desert, do I need them to like map the entire interior, or is it just more important to know like this area down here is the kitchen, and above the kitchen on the second level is the barracks, and way down here on the opposite side is the menagerie where they keep all of their desert beasts, right? I think that's totally fine. A map, like a D&D style top-down gridded map of a stronghold, is like, how useful is that outside of combat? Frankly, I don't think it's useful at all. But a map like this, that is more of a scene style map or something, is a lot easier to reference and get a sense of like, where are all of your hirelings moving around, and you can kind of picture how it would feel to live in it. Or even like this stronghold here is one of a siege tower that is still standing on a wall that can be converted into a stronghold. So it's got like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 levels to it. Just decide what is each level. What do they convert it into? A barracks, a kitchen, an armory, a magic study, the very top is an observatory. Do I need a precise gridded map of those? Not really. I just want you guys to have an idea of what it looks like, so when we're talking about it and we're describing the turns that you want to take with it and the people that are working there and what the life is like as they're bustling about doing all of this, like, we can have some really fun, vivid descriptions of that. I don't need to know that the kitchen has 5 windows, one of which looks to the north, 2 of which look to the, like, I'm already boring myself just barely starting that description. So know your group, have an idea of what they care about. If they're going to have a ton of fun mapping it out together with some grid paper, great. Bring it, throw it out on the table, let them go at it with a little craft exercise, right? But otherwise, I think theater of the mind, scene style stuff is more than acceptable when it comes to mapping your stronghold. So at this point, we know what a stronghold is, at least in the context of D&D 5e. It's a permanent or semi-permanent base of operations for the party or the individual characters. We know when your party gets access to it, level 5, and we have started to talk about mapping out a stronghold, and either that's up to you or your players to do. And obviously, a stronghold is not just a series of hallways and stairs and windows and things, right? You need to have actual rooms in them. When it comes to a 5e stronghold, you have two types. A basic facility, or room or chamber, whatever you want to call it, but they call it a facility. And then you have special facilities. And each of those is either going to be cramped, roomy, or vast in terms of its size. Cramped is a 4 square total area, or a 2x2 space. Roomy is 16 squares total, so a 4x4 cubed room. And vast is 36 squares. So if you're choosing to map it on grid paper, you don't really get a lot of freedom in how exactly you want to map it out until you get into that roomy or vast size. But again, I don't encourage you to do that. I think that these descriptions of room sizes are just there to help you maybe better understand, like when you first get your stronghold and it's very small and cramped, the way you can describe things of the hirelings bumping into each other all the time, the player needing to sleep in a closet while they wait for their room to be built, like that's very fun. And then as they build up to a bigger one and they start to host grand events, or they have their war councils there, or they're having battles there, that's when you want to be able to describe the vastness of this stronghold, right? So it's not something I think you need to pay a ton of attention to, but there are different sizes to these facilities. Now, what is the difference between a basic facility and a special facility? A basic facility gives you no mechanical benefit for having it, but they are the rooms that you just have to have for a structure to feel like a real lived-in space. Things like bedrooms, kitchens, dining halls, courtyards, all those sorts of things. And when you get your stronghold, you get 2 to start with. And they can be whatever you want, but one of them is cramped and one of them is roomy. Now, what's interesting, or I guess different about basic facilities compared to special ones, besides the fact that they don't really give you anything, is that you can add more onto your stronghold as long as you've got the money and the time. So if you are a knight who's inherited a small tower and you eventually want to build that to a keep, you can do that. And here's the exact amounts and timetables that it takes to do so. To build or add a cramped facility, a basic facility, it's 500 gold and it takes 20 days. A roomy facility is 1,000 gold, it takes 45 days, and a vast facility is 3,000 gold and it takes 125 days. 125 days is, I would assume, probably higher than the average in-game or in-world length of time that a campaign actually runs. So when I was reading that, I was just like, again, I don't know who these rules are written for. It just seems very not in line with what modern D&D is. But I think just knowing that there is some gold piece value there is very useful, because I think for most of our worlds, whether they be high fantasy or, like in my case, sort of a grim darky, it used to be very high tech, now it's fallen back into a medieval sort of society type of thing, there's lots of opportunities to do some useful hand waving when it comes to constructing things. If I don't want to worry about this 45-day amount of time that it takes to build a roomy facility, then I can just say when the party kind of comes back from a week or so that they've been out doing some adventuring, maybe not a week, a couple weeks or whatever, they come back, I can just say the guild that you hired to build this facility brought in a mage who used some of their magics to do mold earth or whatever, and bam, there you go. Or there's cranes and all types of useful construction equipment that just makes it a lot quicker than people laying bricks individually and all that sort of stuff. So I encourage you, do some hand waving with expanding basic facilities. Otherwise, it's just going to be such a frustratingly slow slog of building out your stronghold. I think that could be pretty annoying. But then when it comes to special facilities, you start with 2. But you don't get to add them whenever you want with gold, like you can basic facilities. And special facilities, the reason being, is that they have mechanical benefits. These are going to be things like an arcane study, an armory, an alchemical lab. At some of the higher levels, you have things like a menagerie where you can store a bunch of beasts and things, or a teleportation hall. And you gain these as you increase in levels. So when you get your stronghold at level 5, you have 2. that you can pick from a list. There's a big long list. I'm not going to go over every single one in this video. Here in a couple minutes, I'll give an example. We'll kind of go through one or two, but you've got a chunk of them you can pick at level 5. They come with prerequisites as well. Some of them you might have to have a certain skill proficiency, or you might have to have like access to spell casting. You have a spell casting focus you can use or something like that. So you can pick from those. Then when you reach level 9, you get an additional 2 more. At level 13, you get 1 more. And at level 17, you get 1 final special facility to add to your stronghold. My thoughts with these, though, when it comes to adding them in and kind of that progression, especially if you like look through the list of them, why some of them are at certain levels is a little weird to me. Like a tap hall or like a bar, I think is like a level 13 requirement, as opposed to what I would think sounds like something a level 5 character could do. Like, I don't think innkeepers in the typical D&D world are level 13. So if someone can help me in the comments understand some of the balance that must have gone into this, it's just kind of going over my head, or frankly, I just don't really care about it. So I, in my games, might be willing to stretch the rules as written type of ruling when it comes to giving my players some of these special facilities, because some of them are just really cool. But if you want to go rules as written, that's how it works. You get 2 when you first acquire it, 2 more at level 9, 1 at 13, 1 at 17, and then that's kind of it. One fun thing, though, an additional detail here, is every time you reach one of those milestones, those level milestones, you not only get the additional 2 or 1 stronghold facilities, but you can swap an old one out. You can convert them. Now, funny enough, it doesn't give you some weird timetable limit to do that. It's just like, does the hand waving, I guess, of like, oh no, in this case, it was just being converted over a period of time, right? So, and this is great for 2 reasons. One is you won't get to level 13 or 17 and be stuck with these lower level 5 facilities where you're like, I don't even really know how to use these. Like, you can just bump them up and have a truly powerful stronghold with all kinds of cool abilities. So that's one reason I think that's really cool. 2 is I think it gives your players more opportunities to think about, how do I want to flesh out my character's growth and my investment and my long-term thinking with my facility outside of just purely mechanical benefit, right? Who am I hiring? Who am I working with to expand this facility? Who am I bringing in to run it? Who are my hirelings? And how am I training them? If I have my blacksmith who's running my level 5 armory special facility, who am I going to bring in to be their apprentice as to run the armory, as then the person who's doing that before kind of advances to run the armor hall that I have now, or the enchantment hall to make magical weapons? All of that sort of stuff is like the really cool part of having a stronghold, I think. At least to me, the narrative aspect of it is so cool, and I do think that there's plenty of opportunities to do that. But yeah, that is the bulk of kind of the rules that we just covered really, really briefly here as an overview of, you get your basic facilities, you have your special facilities, you can buy basic ones, you get special ones with levels. At this point, hopefully you're kind of asking yourself, like, who is running this stronghold? I'd mentioned hirelings a moment ago, but I haven't really given a lot of details about that. The player characters are more than likely constantly coming and going. They're not here to run their strongholds all the time. How does this work? The rules don't really give you a lot of guidance on that. From rereading it a few times, it says kind of with a very hand-wavy sort of tone to it of like, it is assumed that your stronghold has enough people to run it and it can pay them to do so, which I agree with the ruling. I think that makes sense. I don't want to, as the DM or a player, care about tracking the specific amounts of income and needing to deal with like firing hirelings because I can't afford to pay them, or hiring new ones and all that kind of stuff. I think that's fine. I think that's a good way to go about it. Yep, this stronghold can kind of just maintain business as usual when it comes to hireling. But what it doesn't do is give you a lot of guidance as to how many do you get. It says the only like specific wording I could find is you get like 1 or more hirelings to run your special facilities. And when we look at an example here in a couple minutes, we'll see like it tells you when you get this facility, you get this many hirelings to run it. But it's like, well, what about in the kitchen? Like, how many people are there and how many people are running the trade that's going on here? Who's watching the gates and all that sort of thing? So I really wish I would have seen more advice and random tables for that. in the rule book of, hey, here's a list of some just commoners who can be working at your stronghold to have some fun interactions with, but it doesn't really do that. It does distinguish hirelings and defenders of your stronghold, and there is an ability to recruit more defenders to your stronghold. That's like the only point where it seems to keep like a precise track. It keeps track of precisely how many defenders you have, because if your stronghold ever comes under attack, then you have to be able to know like how many people are there to defend it, and if you lose all of them, like what happens to your stronghold. So we'll talk about that though later on in this video as well. But yeah, hirelings was a thing that they just sort of glossed over in a lot of ways, and it kind of leaves a lot of weight on the DM, I think, to fill in those blanks and decide like who are these people. I will use this as an opportunity to plug my Kickstarter zine, The Doom Stronghold. This list right here has 1d12 trade workers that you can use to fill out those personalities. I'll give you an example of one right now, actually, just for the hell of it. You might hire to help you in running this. Let's go with number 9. Roland the Bold, a wickedly clever minstrel and jester whose ability to entertain esteemed guests is almost always at your expense, but is certain to open their coffers in support of your adventurous pursuit. So that's a fun little random trade worker as part of your staff. You have a jester or a minstrel. Maybe for the majority of the time they're a cook, but then whenever you're actually hosting an event, they put on their silly costume and dance around and do things to entertain your guests. It's a fun little flavorful thing that has no mechanical benefit unless you want it to. Like I said in there, maybe that helps kind of win people over your cause, but that's the sort of thing that I wanted to provide you with in this zine, and it's something I would have liked to have seen more in this rulebook. But with hirelings out of the way, however you decide to kind of go about handling it, we now know you've got people running this stronghold, and your characters have picked out their basic and special facilities. So now we're going to talk about orders, because orders are things that when you have your bastion turn, that thing we talked about at the beginning of this video, your players get to decide what orders do they give based off of the special facilities they have. And there are a couple kind of overarching terms for the types of orders that can be given, that then when they apply to a specific facility, it kind of specifies how does this facility go about following that order. But here's the ones that they list out. So you've got the crafting order. So obviously you'll have a facility that can create basic supplies or some sort of magical item. You've got an empowering order. This will give either you or the people running your stronghold some sort of boon. A few often examples I saw in there were like some sort of reroll. If you spend time at the stronghold while you're doing this empowering order, then when you leave, you have this sort of free point of inspiration, or you have a D10 you can apply to a roll or something like that. You can do a harvesting order. So if you've got a garden or things like that, you can collect resources to use in crafting or just take off on your adventuring. You've got a recruiting order. This is going to bring in, from most of the ones I saw in the rulebook, it's going to bring in defenders, but there is an opportunity, I think with the teleportation chamber, you can recruit a mage and they'll show up and they can cast a spell for you. It's kind of a little weird in the way that they explain how they do that. It's like they can cast one spell for you and they're not going to help you in the defending of your stronghold. It's like, oh, okay, well, would have been nice to have a fireball spell to help protect my stronghold from some attackers, but hey, I'll take the good berry spell for my mage hireling or whatever that got brought in. But anyways, you can also do the researching order. So you've got your scholars off in the library doing research on a magical item or the enemy that you're fighting or some monster lore and stuff like that. Or you've got the trading special order, so engaging in some ability to sell off a bunch of goods, maybe the ones that you harvested, or acquire some new equipment and things like that for you. Those are the special orders. You need to either be in your stronghold to give that order, or you have to have some sort of way to communicate with your stronghold to give that order. As I mentioned before, you have the sending spell, or you have sending stones, or some way to send a letter to your people in the stronghold. If you are not present at your stronghold, it is assumed that they do the maintain special order. And this one they say is different because it applies to the entire stronghold. It kind of is just like everybody who's there, all of your hirelings sort of just pitch in to keep this thing running. And this is a really, really weird rule to me. It makes sense that you would need to have some sort of maintain the stronghold order. But what is weird to me is when it applies, it's like, oh yeah, if you're not there to specifically tell your people who are running your alchemy lab to brew alchemical components, they just sort of like throw their hands up like, well, I guess I'll go sweep the hallway. It's like, what? Like, it just seems like so easy if I were a player, I'd be like, why can't I just have it be conveyed to my hirelings who run my alchemy lab facility? Like, hey, if I'm not here, I want you to just keep like, here's the list of potions that I want brewed. Here's the backlog. Just work on these. It's very, very weird to me that if you're not there, your hirelings just all play dumb and just sort of like, or I guess play house or whatever. The value, or what makes it interesting to have this maintain order, is that you roll on a table of like events that can happen when you maintain your facility. There's like a 50-50 chance that nothing happens, and if you roll like it's a D100 roll. If you roll a 0 to a 50, then you roll on a little like D10 table. It's like, oh, someone thinks they saw a ghost, or oh, someone adopted a dog, or blah 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 blah. It's like a couple like random little things that don't actually matter outside of just a fun little narrative thing. But then 51 or higher can have things like your stronghold comes under attack, and this is where you have to know how many defenders you have, and you roll some dice to see, do you lose more defenders? I think it actually says in the specific attack roll, like, no matter what, you succeed in defending your stronghold. It's just a matter of how many of your defenders do you lose. But other things that can happen on this roll under the maintain order is you might accidentally hire a criminal, and some mercenary or a bounty hunter shows up, and you have to bribe them if you want to keep this hireling, or otherwise they take them away. You might host some sort of event. A baron shows up and wants to hold a gala at your stronghold, and that's what happens while you're away. Or a magical item is discovered, or refugees show up. They're being chased by a monster or an invading army, and they need to rest here, and they'll give you some gold if you let them stay. Like, all of these really interesting things can happen with the stronghold while you're gone. That's another really, really weird part of the maintain order. It's like when you're there and you give this special order to your people to harvest things from the garden, or to create a magical item or whatever, it's like your character's sort of just there either watching, or they can't. Some of the facilities say you can like participate, and if you do participate, you get a benefit out of it. But it's just really weird to me that your characters can all be gone, and then your session can almost become derailed by having this maintain order that can lead on to all these crazy side stories, these B plots with the C tier NPCs in the campaign. And it says in the rulebook, it says like, this is a fun opportunity for your players to kind of step into the role of the NPCs and have like, role play them. I wouldn't probably do that at my table. I think most players struggle enough as it is, like really truly getting into those shoes, like in the role of their character and speaking and acting on their behalf, to then be like, hey, you got to now take on the role of that chef who, guess what? They're actually a fugitive, and there's the bounty hunter that's here to get you. What are you going to do, right? Like, I could just see that just completely eating away at a session and being more of a distraction. Those things seem more fun if the players were there. Don't you think? Like, I just would imagine it would be a lot more fun to be able to do your special facility orders and the maintain order at the same time. And when the characters are away, I don't know if I would spend a lot of time with this maintain order, at least in my game. I would look at the options that can occur, and if I see like, ooh, the stronghold comes under siege, that's cool. I don't want it to happen right now completely randomly, but I do want to start sprinkling some seeds into the story to give your character, or to give my characters the idea that, hey, there's a hobgoblin army that's kind of invading or working their way into the kingdom, and they might learn of your stronghold, and you could become under siege by some hobgoblins, and if you don't get back in time, when you arrive, your stronghold is already under siege, and then you can't use it at all, and that's like part of the campaign. Like, that to me is how I would use this section of rules. The maintain order and the tables you're rolling on the events that can occur are not actually part of my process of running a session and all that. It's more of just like fuel for cool things that can happen as part of my characters' campaigns and the adventures they're going on and things like that. Hopefully that makes sense. But if you do want to do it rules as written, then you got to be home to give these special orders. Otherwise, while you're away, everybody just kind of hangs out and makes sure things go as good as they possibly can with your stronghold. Now is a good time, I think, to actually look at some of these special facilities and just get you familiar with the general layout, because they all have their sort of own stat block. And the one I'm going to have up on the screen right now is the Arcane Study. So this is a level 5 Bastion facility. So this is one you could take right when you get your stronghold. But there is a prerequisite. You can see at the top, you need to have the ability to use an arcane focus or tool as a spellcasting focus. It is a roomy sized area. So what is that? A 16 square, so a 4x4. If you want to map it, it comes with one hireling to run it, and the order you can issue to this special facility is the craft order. Now, some of these stat blocks you'll notice here have there's a little additional benefit or something cool you can get to from it in addition to the order. So an arcane study is a place of quiet research that contains one or more desks and bookshelves. An arcane study charm is one of its little special things here. After spending a long rest in your bastion, you gain a magical charm. See supernatural gifts in chapter 3. That lasts for 7 days or until you use it. The charm allows you to cast Identify without expending a spell slot or using material components. You can't gain this charm again while you still have it. Really fun, cool little easy thing, and Identify is a spell that players hate to have to use a spell slot to cast it, and they want to just know what their magical item does immediately. Hey, here's a fun little facility that can give you that ability. But then if you do issue the craft order, your arcane study can craft one of the following. It could do an arcane focus. You commission the facility's hirelings to craft an arcane focus. The work takes 7 days and costs no money. The arcane focus remains in your bastion until you claim it. Or they could craft a book. You commission your facility's hireling to craft a plain book or a blank book. The work takes 7 days and costs you 10 gold piece. The book remains in your bastion until you claim it. Real fast, I'm going to point out, it seems bizarre to me that it costs more for your arcane study to make a book that doesn't even have any words in it. It is a blank book. Than it costs to make an arcane focus, a magical relic or tool able to conjure miraculous spells. That's just weird, but okay. I feel like that's pretty indicative of some of the weird hoop jumping, weird mental gymnastics that sort of happen with 5e rules of just well, this thing has a gold piece and oh, I guess we should add one here, but then no one thinks to go back and check, does this thing need a gold piece cost as well, and how does it compare to this thing? Right? It's all just so oddly subjective, it would seem. So I would say do some hand waving here. I'm not going to charge my characters 10 gold piece to get a book if I'm not going to charge them anything for an arcane focus. But anyways, back on track here. You could also craft a magical item. If you are level 9 or higher, you can commission the facility's hirelings to craft a common or an uncommon magic item chosen by you from the arcane tables in chapter 7. The facility has the tool required to craft the item, and the hireling has proficiency with that tool, as well as proficiency in the arcana skill. See the crafting magic items section in chapter 7 for the time and money that must be spent to craft the item. I think that makes sense. If you want to make a truly magical item, that should cost you something in terms of gold piece. If the item allows its user to cast any spells from it, you must craft the item yourself. The facility's hirelings can assist, which I would assume gives you advantage. And you must have all those spells prepared every day you spend crafting the item. Not having the list right in front of me, I'm sure there are some items, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking this isn't an item per se, but it's still a good example. A teleportation circle. To make that, I remember at least in the old rules, it was it took a year, and you had to cast the spell every single day as part of the process to create a true teleportation circle. So I can only imagine there are going to be some magical items, even uncommon ones, that are going to have a period of time required to make it that it's oh my god, you're either going to require everybody else to have some really extended periods of downtime, or we're going to need to do some more hand waving here. I don't think this is a requirement that I would enforce on my players. You have to be there and you have to have these spells. I would offer them this, maybe as an alternative. Okay, clearly your hirelings are not spell casters, but if you go acquire for them the spell scrolls needed that would be the same spells required to make this item, then you can show them how to recite them, and then that can play into them creating this magical item for you. That's great. Another excuse for your players to go use their gold piece that very rarely they have good reasons to use unless they're dumping it into some super expensive magical item, right? Go talk to the shopkeep, get some magical items, maybe you learn a little rumor while you're in town, come back, drop off the spell scrolls, boom, off to the adventure you go, and when you come back home, your hirelings are going to have created for you an ever-burning torch or whatever uncommon magical item you want. So that's one example of a special facility. I'm just going to flip to a random one and we'll go through that just as one more example. Here's a cool one. A reliquary, a level 13 bastion facility. Prerequisite, ability to use a holy symbol or druidic focus as a spellcasting focus. It is cramped. That is, oh, I guess that makes sense. Well, sort of. A reliquary is like a place to store magical items. I like that. It's a level 13 bastion facility and it's a 4x4 space. I guess it's like one specific reliquary you put in there. I don't know how I feel about that. Comes with one hireling, and you can issue the harvest order to it. So this vault holds sacred objects. Oh, it's a vault. Oh, okay, that's one way to describe it, I suppose. I don't know if I would have it be like a locked vault. I more think of like what you see in Catholic churches and things over in Europe with like the glass, almost sarcophagus-looking thing that has the saint's skull in it or their arm or whatever. Sort of like a little shrine is kind of how I think of it. But a reliquary charm is one of its special abilities. After spending a long rest in your bastion, you gain a magical charm that lasts for 7 days or until you use it. You can see the supernatural gifts in chapter 3. So this is kind of similar to the one we saw before, but the charm allows you to cast greater restoration once without expending a spell slot or using material components. You can't gain this charm again while you still have it. These types of abilities I love. This little expendable thing that you just get almost passively by simply having this bastion facility that then you can take with you into your adventures. That's perfect. That's so useful and fun for the characters, and it doesn't disrupt the story. Or you've got the harvest order. If you issue that, it uses the talisman ability. When you issue the harvest order to this facility, you commission its hirelings to produce a specially prepared talisman for you to use. The talisman usually takes the form of an amulet, a rune-carved box, or a statuette, but it can be any tiny non-magical object that has a religious significance. The work takes 7 days and costs no money. You can use this talisman in place of one's spell's material components, provided the components have a cost of 1,000 gold piece or less. If the spell normally consumes its components, the talisman isn't consumed. After the talisman has been used in this way, it can't be used again until you return to your reliquary and use another harvest order to prepare it. Oh, this one also is really cool. Dang, the reliquary is awesome. Not only do you get your little charm, your reliquary charm, that can let you use greater restoration once, but you also get a free material component from this holy object, whatever it is. My campaigns are always grimdarky, so I'm thinking of that, the priest's severed hand that has been stored in here or whatever, or their skull that you carry with you as like an incense burner as part of your ritual to use this spell without requiring a material component. So fun. But your players can have a heyday with the flavor they add to this. And there is that requirement of it takes 7 days to create, but 7 days is a pretty reasonable amount of time. Like, that's enough where you're at your stronghold, you issue the order, hey, make this thing for me. And then in the meantime, they go do one little side quest, right? The next session, they're doing their side quest. The next 2 sessions or the side quest, they come back. And has it been precisely 7 days? Maybe not. But it's enough time, at least in terms of sessions that have passed, that it feels appropriate, I think, to then give them this reward of your harvest talisman. So that's what all of these look like. And there is a huge list of your stronghold special facilities that I'll show you here. Like tons and tons and tons to work with. All of them having unique abilities and things like that. So you'll want to skim through that with your players because it is in the DMG. This is not in the PHB, so your players will have a harder time being as familiar with this as they will be spells or special abilities and things like that. So probably just take a picture and send it along to your players or whatever. But yeah, those are some of the examples of the special facilities and the orders you can issue with them in your stronghold. And the final bit of rules that they mention here in the section of bastions or strongholds for the 2024 DMG is how to lose a stronghold. And they actually only give you 3 options, really. They say you're either going to lose your stronghold if you abandon it, which is a weird one to include in the rules. Like, okay, I would obviously, if you abandon a stronghold, you don't have it anymore. But then the other one they give you is if you don't issue orders to your stronghold for a number of turns equal to your level, and that's bastion turns, right? Then it's assumed to be abandoned and looted. If I was in a campaign and I came to a session and my DM said, ooh, bad news, by the way, everybody, you guys haven't been issuing orders to your stronghold, so I'm afraid it's been abandoned. I'd be like, what the fuck, dude? Like, why? You should have reminded me. Like, that also just feels like, in what universe is that happening? a Nightmare DM universe where you're going to get a Reddit post about like how my DM stole my stronghold from me because we've been off fighting Vecna, the Lich, for the past 3 months, and I just never had an opportunity or never thought that I needed to give an order to my people to stay there and keep working on that backlog of alchemical potions, right? Like, it's just so weird to me. And then the third example they give is if you draw the Ruin card from the deck of many things. Those are the 3 examples they explicitly say in the end of this section, like, here's how you can lose a stronghold. I would say a far more realistic example of how you would lose a stronghold is if it comes under siege and you lose the battle. The hobgoblins have shown up, they have your stronghold under siege, and they slaughter your guard as part of the battle, or you're not able to get back in time. Ooh, this would be cool. If I had a campaign and my players have a stronghold, and they're off on another part of the world and on an adventure, but word reaches them from a raven. It brings them a parchment from the captain of the guard of their stronghold. It says, the hobgoblins have shown up, we're under siege, we can only hold them for 2d 10 days, or whatever makes sense for your map, right? There's your timer, and it now becomes a skill challenge of, can your party get back home in time to aid in the fight? That is so dramatic. That would be so cool. And it's like, well, do we just go on land? Do we need to find a teleportation portal to get back there? Do we need to go find a mage who can get us there quicker? We'll never make it in time, right? We rolled a 2 and a 3, 5 days. Are you kidding me? Where it took us 2 weeks to get here. Like, how could we possibly get back? Like, so many problems that need to be solved. And it also begs the question too in your campaign of like, can we afford to go back? We're off fighting Vecna, and we're trying to thwart his rituals and his cultists, and if we go back to save our stronghold, like, then Vecna will be successful in whatever he's trying to do right now. Like, oh man, those are the types of decisions that are the most fun to make in a D&D campaign. So, didn't love how they sort of ended the rules section of like, here's how you can lose your bastion, and it's all bad examples. It's like feel bad. They're feel bad examples, I would say, of how you could lose a stronghold. So, didn't love it, but there you go. That is the Church of Doom's guide to everything you need to know about using a bastion or a stronghold in the new 2024 DMG. Let me know down in the comments a couple things I'd be curious about. Do you use strongholds? Have any of you used these specific rules? Have you gotten to some of these higher levels yet where they're getting access to these special facilities? I'd be very curious to know, how are you all running them? Because I've mentioned a few times in this video, I don't feel like this was written for the types of campaigns and the types of GMs that are more popular right now, but maybe I'm way off base with that. So share some of your inputs, your insights there. Don't forget, the Doom Stronghold, my Kickstarter zine, is live right now, or it has finished up and it is available for purchase on the church's website. But at the end of the day here, really all I hope you got out of this was some real genuine value. I hope that at the very least I've kind of sparked your interest in maybe introducing a stronghold into your campaign. Maybe you don't go so far as to give every character one at level 5, but you want to give your party a singular stronghold that they can build together, and you want to take some of the cool rules from these special facilities and homebrew something of your own to just give your party something awesome to use. Honestly, that's really what I hope for the most out of this video. Not that you're like, well, great, now I have a perfect understanding of rules as written, how to do a stronghold. I would tell you, don't do it rules as written. Do it your way. Do it how it would add the most value and most excitement to your campaign and make your players have fun with it. You don't want it to be a chore or a thing that detracts from the story, right? Not every campaign needs a stronghold. That's totally fine. But that's it for me. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for your support. And we say these things in their unholy names. Amen.